Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Our today's session is on attitude towards language varieties. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand the term attitude in linguistics and sociolinguistics, and you would also be able to understand what does it mean when we say attitude towards linguistic varieties. At the outset, I think we need to understand the term attitude. Well, my dear students, language attitudes are the feelings that people have about their own language variety or the varieties of languages that other people around them use. Let me give you a few examples. For example, when it comes to language use, this is a general attitude where it is said, women talk too much. Another language attitude is, black children are verbally deprived. They speak really bad English down south and in New York City. So, these are particular feelings or particular beliefs that are common about certain languages or about certain language users. So, my dear students, language variety carries social meaning. How does it carry social meaning? It can bring varied attitudinal reactions or even social disadvantages or advantages to you. So, for example, think of yourself, if you go to the market and on the street, you meet somebody and that person speaks English. Or you meet a person who speaks Sindhi or Punjabi or Pashto or any of the regional languages of Pakistan. Or you meet somebody who may from appearance look Pakistani but speaks, for example, French. You would have a certain kind of a reaction. You would have a certain set of feelings related to that. For example, with the French language would come a feeling of, interacting with some foreigner. With English, a social class, elitism, the idea of elitism in social setup would come. With, for example, somebody who is speaking a local language, the idea of middle class or less educated people probably would come. Or, there would be differences in terms of degrees of formalities and informalities as well. So, people have a particular attitude towards a particular language, and based on that attitude that they have towards that language, they also have an attitude towards the speaker or speakers of that language. It is also very important to understand that there are certain stereotypes that are very, easily associated as attitudinal responses to certain languages. It is, thought stereotypically that language X is more sophisticated or language Y is less sophisticated or language A is sweeter or language B is crude or language A is the language of the learned or language C is the language of illiterate, etc. So, with all these attitudes or feelings that are associated with the languages that I have talked about, the same attitudes and the feelings, they are passed on to, when it comes to responses towards the speakers as well. People can have a positive attitude or a negative attitude towards a particular linguistic variety. This positive or negative attitude can be based on various factors. For example, pronunciation, for example, certain word choices, vocabulary, etc. These attitudes or these behaviors can be related to the grammar of a language, where it can be thought about a particular language that this language has a more complicated or a more complex kind of structure as compared to another language. When it comes to language attitude, I would say folk belief and various aspects of language also have a significant role to play in that. Now, this leads us to a very important aspect of this discussion, and that is, what are the implications of language attitude? If people have a certain kind of a language attitude, what does it mean? What happens because of that? Now, language attitudes usually entail attitudes to the speakers of particular language or dialect. What does it mean? It means if a language is considered superior, the speakers or the users of that language are also considered to be superior. On the other hand, if a language is considered to be inferior, the users or the speakers of that language, they are also considered to be inferior. So, a kind of social status that is attached to a language would be attached to the speakers of that language as well. There is evidence that language attitudes influence sound change. How much you believe in certain, facts or certain thoughts about a language, and in what ways do you believe that can affect the language change process. So probably if language X and the users of language X consider their variety to be inferior and they consider variety Y to be superior, they would try to change their pronunciations to assimilate it with language Y so that their language can have a better status. So this is an example of how sounds can be changed due to language attitude. Language attitudes may influence how teachers deal with pupils. For example, how, people, the teachers, when they deal with the students in the classroom, different linguistic backgrounds of the students or the learners would place them in different kinds of attitudinal perspectives, and the teachers would treat them in a different way. And then how a particular language itself would be taught in the class is also very important, because if the teaching system itself, the teacher and the pupils, they attach some kind of attitudinal importance to a particular language, it would be taught differently, of course, from the language that is not given importance. This also applies on the broader level of policy making, educational policy of any country, syllabus designing, etc. Attitudes about language may affect second language learning as well. And my dear students, language attitudes may affect whether or not some varieties are mutually understandable. If there is variety A and there is variety B, what are the attitudes of people towards these two varieties? This is what would lead towards these two groups of users of language A and B to learn each other's language and to use each other's language. So what I would conclude by saying is that language attitude really matters a lot in terms of whether a particular group of people would behave in a certain way or the other way towards a particular language.